What happens when a CEO trades his polished office for a graveyard shift and finds out his company's rot begins after dark? Silas Shepherd stood in the back of the fifth-floor boardroom, arms crossed, watching the district manager talk his way around yet another rising turnover report. 5 different locations, 5 different excuses. Security costs are up, the district manager said, flipping a chart. But shrink is still climbing. Night crews are sloppy, we're bleeding product. Silas didn't flinch. You ever work nights in one of these? The man blinked. No, sir. Didn't think so. Silas had inherited the warehouse chain from his father 3 years ago. Back then, there were 8 locations. Now there were 5. He kept the lights on, modernized the systems, added benefits, but something still wasn't working. His gut told him the truth was buried in shifts no one from corporate ever saw. So he made a call, hired a private uniform company, created a fake ID under the name Shane Stevens, had a new beard grown in and hair dyed darker. No one at the warehouses had ever met him face to face, just emails and memos. That's how it went in bigger chains. He'd been a name on a letterhead. Now he'd be a body at the door. He picked the busiest warehouse store known for constant night staff turnover. He told HR he was hiring a temporary contracted guard. No one batted an eye. The first night, Silas reported at 10:30 sharp. The building sat off a quiet access road just outside Tucson, tall fencing, one flickering light over the dock. He was met by a lanky, gum-chewing manager in his late 20s. "You the new rent-a-cop," the guy said, not even looking up from his phone. "That's me," Silas nodded. "Shane." The man barely gave him a glance. "I'm Kyle. Don't fall asleep in the booth. That's all I care about." "Got it." The night started slow. A couple of trucks rolled in late. Some workers smoked behind the loading bay. Silas walked the perimeter, logging his rounds. He noticed the cameras were pointed wrong, one aimed at a wall, another pointing down at a stack of old pallets. Inside, the warehouse hummed. Forklifts beeped. Workers moved fast, but something felt off. No music, no chatter, faces looked tight, tired. Just past 1 in the morning, he walked the interior route again. That's when he heard it near the break room door, 2 voices, low but heated. "You think they're gonna do anything?" one voice said. "They don't care. We told Kyle. We told him twice." A woman responded. "He doesn't care 'cause he's in on it. Look at the damn logs. Stuff's getting marked delivered that never shows." "Yes, and we take the fall when inventory's off. I got written up for something I didn't even touch." Silas stepped closer, staying out of sight. The man kept talking. "That new kid, Trevor, he quit Saturday. Said Kyle threatened him for asking too many questions." The woman's voice dropped. "I'm scared to say anything. I need this job, my kid's sick, if I get fired." "You won't," the guy said. "But damn, I'm tired of this place chewing people up." They walked off before Silas could catch their names. He stood frozen, his fists clenched. Back in the booth, he checked the logs Kyle had given him. Dispatch sheets didn't match the arrival times. Some entries had the same handwriting Kyle's. There were even delivery forms dated 2 days in the future. The next night, Silas returned early. He parked across the street, watching. At 9:40, a beat-up van pulled into the back lot. Kyle came out, opened the dock, and helped unload unmarked boxes. No paperwork, no scanners. Silas wrote it all down. By his 3rd shift, he knew something bigger was happening. Kyle wasn't just lazy, he was running a side hustle. Possibly stealing inventory, falsifying entries, and intimidating staff who questioned it. The night crew, overworked and barely holding on, were being blamed. At 2 in the morning, Silas caught sight of the same woman from before, slender build, long black braid, hunched at a table eating crackers from a napkin. She looked exhausted, alone. He walked in slowly. "Hey," he said, You all right? She looked up startled. Yeah, just taking a break. You work all night? Yeah, 6 days a week. Rough. She nodded, eyes wary. You're the new guard. Yeah, Shane. Hazel, she said. Hazel Zimmerman. He nodded. Didn't mean to eavesdrop the other night, but I heard a bit. Her face went pale. I'm not here to make trouble, he added. Just trying to understand what's really going on. Hazel looked at him for a long moment, then she sighed. You want to know the truth, she said. Come back after 3, Kyle leaves early. That's when people talk. Silas sat back in the booth, heart pounding. He'd come looking for answers. What he found was a system cracking from the inside, and the worst was still coming. At 3:15 in the morning, the warehouse felt colder, quieter. The forklifts were idle, and most of the workers were either sorting the last incoming pallets or hunched over paperwork. Kyle had left 20 minutes earlier, tossing his keys on the breakroom table and muttering something about needing to check on inventory transfers at Store 2. No one questioned it. No one even looked up. Silas waited until the sound of Kyle's car faded down the access road before stepping away from the security booth. Hazel was near the back wall, stacking shipping labels into a worn plastic bin. She glanced toward him quickly, then nodded once, as if to say, now. She led him behind the second row of shelf towers, where the noise of the fans drowned out distant footsteps. 2 others were already there, an older man with deep lines around his eyes and a younger woman with a faded hoodie pulled tight around her shoulders. This is Shane, Hazel said quietly. He's been asking questions, thought it might be worth talking. The older man didn't say anything at first. He just leaned against the rack, arms folded, staring at Silas. Why do you care? The girl in the hoodie asked. Her arms were crossed, and her tone carried the edge of someone who'd been disappointed too many times. Silas didn't dodge it, because something's off here, and the people running this place don't seem to care. The man finally spoke. You have no idea how off it is. His name was Paul. He'd worked warehouse jobs for 34 years, 5 at this location. I've seen bad managers, he said. But Kyle, he's not just bad, he's dangerous. He described how Kyle had slowly replaced reliable team leads with temps he could push around. Anyone who asked too many questions ended up with their hours cut. One guy got reassigned to freezer duty until he quit from the cold. The girl in the hoodie, Talia, jumped in. He tells us not to clock breaks, says company policy changed, but it didn't. I checked. Called HR once next day, my schedule disappeared from the board. Hazel added, people are scared to speak up. I've seen Kyle rip up time cards. When the new scanner system broke last month, he started logging hours by hand. Half the checks were short. Paul shook his head. That's not even the worst of it. You know that backloading dock, the one with the broken latch? Stuff goes out that door that's never scanned. We tell Kyle, he says it's overflow product, but I know what missing inventory looks like. Talia's voice dropped. We think he's selling it. Silas didn't push. He didn't need to. The pieces were fitting together too cleanly, and the most damning part was the silence from above. No one from corporate had shown up in months. No audits, no walkthroughs, just a steady stream of reports that didn't match the reality in front of him. He stayed with them for 15 minutes, asking questions, taking mental notes. Then he walked the perimeter again, this time slower. He checked the west camera, still pointed at the fence, still useless. At 4:57, a delivery truck pulled in early. The driver waved but didn't wait for anyone to unlock the gate. He punched in a code and drove straight onto the lot. Silas stepped out of the booth. Hey, he called out. You work for Quest Freight. Yeah, the driver said, sliding down from the cab. Kyle told me to use the code, said it was fine. He give you a manifest for the drop. The man hesitated. said paperwork was inside. Silas nodded slowly. All right, just hang tight before you unload. He called Hazel over. This happen often. She looked at the truck and frowned. That's not one of our usuals, and no one gives out the gate code. At least, they're not supposed to. Silas logged the license plate and snapped a quick photo of the truck's ID number. The driver seemed nervous now, pacing near the tailgate. When Silas asked again about the manifest, the guy climbed back in and drove off, tires skidding slightly on the gravel. By 6, the sun was brushing the edges of the desert sky. The day crew trickled in, yawning, greeting each other in low voices. Silas stayed out of sight, watching. None of them spoke to the night shift. There was no overlap, no communication, just a silent handoff of exhaustion and indifference. He drove back to his hotel and didn't sleep. The next 2 nights confirmed what he already suspected: unauthorized trucks, falsified logs, Kyle disappearing for hours at a time, then returning with vague explanations and a heavy scent of smoke on his jacket. Workers too worn down to push back. A culture of fear stitched into every corner of the building. On the 4th night, something changed. It was just past midnight when a commotion broke out near the loading dock. Silas rushed over and found Talia backed against a stack of crates, tears in her eyes. Kyle stood in front of her, face twisted, voice raised. You don't get to talk to drivers like that, he snapped. You're not a supervisor. I just asked for the paperwork, she said, her voice shaking. That's what we're supposed to do. Kyle stepped closer. You think I don't know what you're doing, whispering behind shelves. Keep pushing and you'll be out like the last one. Silas didn't hesitate. Step away from her. Kyle turned, startled. This doesn't concern you. It does now. Talia's hands were clenched at her sides. Silas stepped between them. You threaten her again, he said quietly, and I'll make sure you're escorted off the property. Kyle scoffed. You're a guard, you don't have that authority. No, Silas said, but I know someone who does. He pulled out his phone and dialed a number he hadn't used in months, the direct line to the company's internal audit lead. He kept his voice low. Emergency escalation. Store 4. Misconduct, falsified records, security breaches, and employee intimidation. I want a full audit team here within 24 hours. Then he hung up and turned back to Kyle. You're relieved of duty effective immediately. You can leave now or wait here until the audit team arrives. Your choice. Kyle's face flushed. You're making a mistake. Silas stared at him. So did you. Kyle stormed out without another word. Talia sank onto a nearby crate, her whole body trembling. Hazel arrived seconds later, eyes wide. What happened? Silas looked around at the stunned faces of the night crew. It's over, he's out. Paul stepped forward slowly, as if waiting for the catch. Who are you? Silas drew a breath. My name's Silas Shepherd. I own this company. The silence that followed was like gravity heavy, immediate, undeniable. No one's getting fired for speaking out, he said. No one's hours are being cut. An audit team will be here by tomorrow night. Every timesheet, every invoice, every camera angle is getting reviewed. And you're getting back pay for every stolen hour. Hazel's eyes filled, but she didn't cry. She just nodded, jaw tight, as if forcing herself to believe it. Paul shook his head slowly. Took an owner in a security jacket to finally see us. Silas met his eyes. That's on me, but it won't happen again. He stayed through the rest of the shift, answering questions, taking notes. When the sun rose, he didn't go back to his hotel. He stayed for the day crew arrival, met with the assistant manager, and called in a regional supervisor to oversee the transition. One question still lingered in his mind: how had this gone unnoticed for so long? But the answer was simple. No one had bothered to look, until now. By the time the internal audit team arrived at Store 4, the warehouse had already begun to shift in tone. Not dramatically, no one was suddenly cheerful, but there was a subtle difference in how the night staff carried themselves. They weren't looking over their shoulders as much. There was less silence between tasks. Still, the air held a cautious edge, like a storm had passed, but the power hadn't been restored. Silas stayed another night, not in uniform this time. He walked the floor openly, clipboard in hand, observing everything quietly while the auditors set up in a converted office space off the main corridor. The warehouse crew kept working, but every eye lingered just a second longer when they passed him. Respect mixed with uncertainty. Hazel approached him near the inventory cages, wiping her hands on the sides of her coveralls. Her voice was quieter than before, but steadier. "So what happens now?" Silas didn't sugarcoat it. "We're going to pull every time card, every inventory record, and cross-check them against security footage. It's going to take days, not hours. Anyone who was complicit will be out. And the people who kept this place running despite it all, they'll be compensated." Hazel nodded once. "You keeping us on nights?" "For now, but shifts will be reorganized once we've got a handle on staffing gaps. And the cameras are being recalibrated starting tonight." Hazel didn't smile, but some of the tension in her shoulders eased. "You should talk to Elias. He's been here longest, knows where the rot started." Silas found Elias near the mechanical dock lifts, repairing a jammed roller. He was in his 60s, wiry, with a mechanic's hands steady, deliberate. Elias didn't stop what he was doing when Silas approached. "Hazel says you've been here a while." Elias nodded once, "Since the month it opened." "You ever report anything about Kyle?" Elias paused, then looked up. "Tried, twice. First time nothing happened. Second time I got bumped to weekends only, said it was for operational balance. Stopped pushing after that." Silas leaned against the metal beam beside him. "I won't pretend to fix years of neglect overnight, but I'm not leaving until we've reset the foundation." Elias's eyes held his for a moment. "Then start by listening more than talking. That's where the last guys failed. They came in with speeches, didn't change a thing." Silas gave a short nod. "Fair." Meanwhile, the audit team uncovered enough within 12 hours to confirm what Silas had already suspected: ghost shipments, falsified hours, and a pattern of missing inventory stretching back at least 9 months. But there was something else that hadn't come up before. At 2:30 in the morning, lead auditor Marla knocked on the office door where Silas had set up a temporary desk. She didn't wait for an invitation before stepping in. "We found something buried in the paper logs." Silas motioned for her to continue. "There are scheduled deliveries that never appear in the digital system. They're not just missing, they don't exist in corporate records either. But they show up here, handwritten, with forged signatures from department heads who don't work here anymore." "Internal or external?" "External. Looks like someone was laundering product through fake drops, using warehouse property to store third-party inventory." Silas stood up, fully alert now. Anyone else still here who might have known? Marla hesitated. "Maybe, but we're going to need to interview every night shift employee privately." Silas agreed, and over the next 3 nights, each worker was brought into a small storage room now repurposed with a table, 2 chairs, and a single overhead light. One by one, they answered questions, some nervous, some bitter, some relieved. A few had clearly known more than they'd let on. One of them, a man named Derek, had been on night shift for just under a year. Clean record, but his logs showed unusual access times to restricted areas. When Silas entered the room, Derek didn't meet his eyes. "You've been working here since last spring," Silas said. "Night shift, mostly inventory." Derek nodded slowly. "Your name's on 2 logs for deliveries that never cleared intake. Both after hours, both without manifests. I didn't sign those. You were the only one on shift. Derek's jaw tightened. Kyle told me to open the gate, said it was overflow from store 2. I asked if it was cleared, and he told me not to ask again. Why didn't you report it? I've got a record. Petty theft 5 years back. Nothing since then, but I knew if I made noise, they'd pin it on me. I kept my head down. Silas studied him for a long moment. From this point on, if you want to stay, you'll need to be transparent. No more silence. Understood. Derek nodded, eyes fixed on the floor. Understood. Silas let him return to work, flagged his file for mentorship review, and moved on. They couldn't afford to lose everyone, not with staffing already thin. But silence wouldn't be excused twice. The next night brought a different kind of reckoning. 2 warehouse associates, a woman named Gina and a man named Lex, had shown up late, dragging feet, laughing loudly through the intake corridor. They ignored the sign and board, skipped safety checks, and by midnight had been caught on camera tossing product across the floor in a mock game of catch. When confronted by the shift supervisor, they shrugged it off. Gina laughed. What, you gonna fire us? Kyle didn't care. The supervisor relayed the footage to Silas directly. He didn't hesitate. He walked them off the floor himself. You're done here, he said, handing both of them their termination forms. This place nearly collapsed because too many people assumed no one was watching. That ends now. Gina scoffed. Lex mumbled something under his breath. Take it up with HR, Silas said, but you won't be stepping back in here. After they were gone, the floor settled. There was no applause, no cheer, but people worked with a little more purpose. Boundaries had been drawn. By the 5th night, the audit team had completed the initial sweep. The stolen inventory value had crossed into 6 figures. At least 4 employees were directly implicated in the scheme. 3 had already been terminated. 1 was under final review pending police notification. Silas stood in front of the night shift during their pre-shift meeting, clipboard gone, sleeves rolled up. This time, he wasn't observing. He was leading. I don't expect gratitude, he said, but I do expect honesty. If you see something broken, tell someone. If you're mistreated, speak. And if anyone tries to silence you, they'll answer to me directly. Hazel stepped forward. What about staffing? We're still short. Silas nodded. Hiring has already started. We're bringing in a new shift lead from a sister location, someone I trust. Until then, overtime will be voluntary only. No one's being forced to stay longer than they're scheduled. Elias raised a hand. What about Kyle's old office? Repurposed, Silas said. It's now a break room with working heat, stocked food, and proper chairs. You've earned it. That night, Silas didn't stay in the office. He worked intake with Hazel and Elias, helping unload a late truck, logging inventory by hand when the scanner glitched. At one point, Hazel looked over, eyebrows raised. You sure you're a CEO? Unfortunately, yes, he muttered, hoisting a box onto